Welcome back, people, to the React Hook series, where we cover different React hooks and try to break them down into simpler explanation so they are easier to understand. So, in previous videos, we have covered use effect, use state, use ref, use memo, use callback, stuff like that. Today, we're going to cover another hook, which is kind of a fun one. So, we're going to cover use reducer, which is an alternative way of handling state, but not simple state, rather complicated states updates. Right? Normally, when you have very simple state, like independent state, you can use a state itself. But if it's complicated or if they are interdependent, that's where use reducer comes in. Like for example, just dive right into the code. So I have this counter that we looked at in the first video, that we have simple state, user state, where count, set count, we can increment the count, decrement the count, and it works, right? It works, it's fine, this is perfectly okay. You can, if it's super simple like this, it's fine. But it's not really the case. Like this is very rarely the case that is like kind of simple like this. So what happens if you have a state like this, right? If this is a very fairly common pattern that you would see in a lot of applications. So you have users, you have set loading, you have set error, and when it is being fetched, you basically set its loading to true, which is happening, I would say you set loading to false. When you're done, it is by default it is true, of course. So you show the loading, and as soon as the promise is done, you have fetched the data via API, then you set it to false, set the users, or if it failed, then you set the error and set it to false. So this is an incredibly simple pattern that you will see in a lot of video, in a lot of projects. But this is like kind of interdependent, and you will see that you're doing a lot of manual work, like setting it here, and if it gets like another call here or another some logic here, this will get complicated and messy over time. So it's not really a good pattern to follow. So what we can do here, how does use reducer help us here, right? So let's say that I have a initial state. What do we have? We have three states right now, right? User, loading, and error. Let's simplify them one by one, right? So how does it work? I have a const state and I have dispatch, and let's say react dot use reducer. And what does it accept? It accepts the reducer itself and it accepts initial state. Right. Now let me explain to you what it is overall. So the concept behind the reducer is that you define a way that the state should be handled based on certain action. Right. For example, the start represents the start of the fetching request. The success represent when it's succeeded here, when we have the data. Error represents if it doesn't succeed, it failed in the cache. This is going to be the error state. For these three actions, we perform certain state update, right? And let's start with the loading, right? What are we doing here? We are setting to false, we're setting it to false, and by default it is true, right? So by default it is true here. But what we're gonna do is like it's gonna be false for us. So let's say what I want to do is as soon as this starts, I want to change the loading state from false to true. The loading should show up, right? How would I do that? Super simple. I say dispatch. What should I dispatch? I should dispatch a action, but what is the type of that action? You see this is action the type. So whatever I pass in the dispatch is considered an action, and any data, any payload inside there would be accessible here. Like for example, type, and I define it to be start, right? So if it starts here, then it's fine. This is okay. Now what I'm gonna do is instead of this, using our state here, the loading one, I'm simply gonna say state dot is loading, right? So now you will keep on seeing this because we have set the dispatch to be start, which is perfect. But this is what we're expecting. So now at the success, we're setting it to false, right? What we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste it and say, okay, now it has succeeded. As soon as it succeeded, you see that we have the list now. We have the kind of eliminated the need for this because it's not being used anymore. So what happens here, same thing. We're just gonna copy it, paste it here, and we're gonna say, okay, you know what, error happened. So set the loading to false again. So what we have done is eliminated the need for set loading state. So it's simplified. Let's do the same with error, right? So what are we doing with error? The only thing we're doing is setting it to state here. That's it. And we're using it here. That's it. It's simple. We're going to do it in the same manner that we have. Let's say initial state is going to be null. So that's perfect. What we're going to do, state dot error, and same thing here, and state dot error, right? We're going to use it here. And with the set error, what we want to do, because we want to pass a message, then what we're going to pass it here, let's say I want to pass it a message, right? And I just passed it here. All right. So we remove it from here. And how do we set the message? It's very simple. As I said, just like the action.type, we can access the message here in the same manner. Let's say message, and I will say action dot message. So now we have access to the message as well, and set error, and error is not needed. Perfect. We have eliminated two of them. Now we have the third one, which is users, right? And what happens with the user? We're doing a map over here. So let's just do the same because we have initial state as empty. So Vision should not see anything initially. So let's say state.user.map. So even though it succeeded, we don't see the list because we're using state from the reducer, but we're not setting any data because we're only seeing success. What do? We do the same thing. So users, follow the example of this message. We say users and we say mock users, right? And for mock users, that means it's a success. In success, what we're gonna do is users and dot users, and then it gets updated, right? So now we see the list again. But do we need set users? No, we don't, because we're already setting it, right? You see, we still have the list. And do we need this state? No, we do not. We do not need that state at all. So what have we done is we have simplified this component to have single source of truth, and in that we are accessing all of this state from that state that is being defined in this reducer, and it gives us scalability, keeps our component super simple, and I can have a lot more actions here. Let's just say I can have a pending state, I can have maybe success, I can have something else like access denied, anything at all, like whatever I want to do. I just have to update this here. I don't have to touch this. I only have to call a function that is going to be dispatched here, right? So for example, let's just say in error, I want to reset the users. Let's just say users. I just reset it to empty. So I don't have to do anything here. I just reset it to empty here and it's going to work out. As soon as, let's just say, for example, I have this and I will say throw new error. So new error, right? So it does show the user list, but there's no user here. Why? Because they're being set to empty, if that makes sense, right? So dot message and state dot, let's just say error, and what did we set? We set it to message, right? So we can set this and we can set this, right? So what do we see now? We see failed to fetch users, which is the error that is coming from here. That's how you can simplify the whole data handling state handling for any component rather than defining like 20 states in a single component. So this is what useState helps us with, and this is the power of useState. This pattern is very similar to Redux, so probably a lot of people will be able to grasp it very fast. So I hope this was easier to understand and I was able to make it clear why is it used as compared to useState, and why you should go for useReducer when you should go for useState. So thank you so much for joining. I will see you guys in the next video.